Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the direct route to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast. We are your catapult to the PMP exam and I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. Now, the PMBOK guide is always very methodical. First, you plan something, and then you implement your plan. It's no different in the human resource management knowledge area. And that's why we are now going to take a look at how to develop the human resource plan in the Plan Human Resource Management process. And in doing so, we are going to be focusing on the differences between the project team and the project management team. We look at what is planned in human resource management, how to use the various resource charts like a responsibility assignment matrix to organize and determine human resource needs. We explain roles and responsibility documents and how they are captured, and we illustrate the value of the human resource and staffing management plans as well as resource histograms. To get a high-level overview of human resource management, let's look at three cornerstones of the knowledge area. Project Human Resource Management includes the processes that enable you as a project manager to best organize the resources and also manage the resources and making them efficient, as well as leading the project team to greater heights and effectiveness. Or in the official words of the PMBOK guide, Project Human Resource Management includes the processes that organize, manage, and lead the project team. And like I said in the opening, these processes are organized very methodically. First, you plan something, and then you implement it. Our first process is therefore Plan Human Resource Management. The process of identifying and documenting project roles, responsibilities, required skills, reporting relationships, and creating a staffing management plan. Now we've planned it and we can move on into implementation, which means we are going to acquire the project team. We bring everybody onto our project. This is the process of confirming human resource availability and obtaining the team necessary to complete project activities. Now that the team is on our project, they will start working on our project. Maybe they don't have all the necessary skills, so we're going to have to develop our project team. The process of improving competencies, team member interaction, and overall team environment to enhance project performance. There's also an administrative side to all of this. We also have to manage our project team. This is the process of tracking team member performance, providing feedback, resolving issues, and managing team changes to optimize project performance. Here's once again our usual table that shows you into which process groups our processes fall. And I'm almost afraid to ask, where do you think Plan Human Resource Management, the focus of this lesson, falls? Take a look at the first word there. It says it already in the name of the process. Of course, this is a planning process group. Yes, human resources management, very methodical. First you plan and then you implement. So really, this is almost the archetype of this approach here. We have first a planning process, and that is followed by three executing processes. The main concept that you have to understand is that in this process you plan for what type of resources you need and what qualifications they should have. And then you will move on to define the roles and responsibilities as well as the organization and the reporting relationships for your human resources on your project, which avoids misunderstandings from the start. Of course, you will also plan for how to bring them on and take them off your project. And the result of this process is the Human Resource Management Plan, as well as its subsidiary plan, the Staffing Management Plan. Before we move on, however, I'd like to quickly discuss the terms project team and project management team. If you've already seen our separate lesson on this one, then of course this is a repetition for you. The project team. This is an all-encompassing concept. It explicitly includes the entire group of individuals that may factor into the ultimate staffing of a project from start to finish. The project team includes, of course, all the resources that are actively involved on your project. The project management team, on the other hand, consists of the team members of the project team who are directly involved in project management activities. On some smaller projects, the project management team may include virtually all of the project team members, because everybody on a 3-person project is probably somehow involved in project management activities. Yet on a 3,000 people project, you may only have a small group, a subset of that. The project management team, therefore, is a subset of the project team, and they are responsible for the project management activity. So not the whole team is responsible for planning, controlling, and closing. Only the project management team is responsible for these activities. In planning our human resources, we have to figure out a lot of things. First of all, who are the people that are needed to successfully complete our project? This also includes what skills they have or need to obtain, maybe in the form of training or working with other team members. Or when do they need to come onto the project or leave the project, and any policies or procedures that we have to onboard or offboard them. We need to discuss the responsibilities that they have once they are on the project. We need to discuss who they report to and how to reward or recognize any outstanding performances. These are just a few of the questions that the project management team will be facing throughout project human resources management, so we have to plan for it in this process. From a conceptual perspective in regards to the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs, this process is no different than any other process. We have 4 inputs, and to these inputs we apply certain tools and techniques. As you can see here, there are 5 tools and techniques that we apply to the inputs, and our goal of doing that is to create the human resource management plan as an output. Let's start at the beginning with the inputs. And yes, so there are 4 inputs to this process. They are the project management plan, the activity resource requirements, and we have enterprise environmental factors as well as organizational process assets. But as always, this list, just looking at them like this, is not really all that interesting. It gets much more interesting when we jump into the details and we look at the hows and the whys and the whats. So let's do that. The project management plan is the document that describes how the project is to be executed, monitored, and controlled. It's a treasure chest of information that is used to create the human resource management plan. For example, the project management plan includes communication needs and methods, among many other things. Naturally, you cannot plan the human resource needs if you don't think about what is being planned in other aspects of the project. Say, scope needs or quality plans, or what goes on with procurement. Also, don't forget other components beyond this particular knowledge area and the knowledge area plans, such as the change management plan and the configuration management plan. This content, along with other materials from the project management plan, provides general overarching information that helps you construct the human resource management plan, which is needed to complete the project successfully. To plan your human resources needs, you need to know the amount of activities and the type of resources needed. You find this information in the activity resource requirements. They are an output from estimate activity resources in the project time management knowledge area. Once again, we see that the PMBOK guide uses the concept of creating an output in one area and using it in another as an input quite extensively. In these activity resource requirements, we had already defined what resources we need, such as the competencies that a resource would need to fulfill a specific activity, the sheer number or quantity of resources that are required, and of course the type of resource as well. It is of course no wonder that this important information will be used as an input for human resource planning. And remember that these activity resource requirements are constantly being progressively elaborated. We are learning more and more as we are going through each of our planning processes. These inputs that we receive for the activity resource requirement, they may be pretty basic, and we have to elaborate on them here in this process once more. And of course, we also need to consider the enterprise environmental factors. Let's take a look at 5 such factors, beginning with the organizational culture and structure, in which we look at which departments are involved and do they have any formal working relationships defined. Also, what is the availability of our employees for this project that we may be bringing in from various departments. We need to look at technical factors. Does the project require any particular technical know-how that would translate into human resource requirements? For instance, are we going to be using new technology for which we have zero in-house know-how? We want to look at interpersonal factors, and as the name says, you want to know how people's relationships are. You look at the horizontal relationships to their colleagues and outside contacts, vertical relationships up to their supervisor, and vertical relationships down to their subordinates. And of course, geographical factors are going to play a role here. You need to look at where your people are located physically. The distance and time difference plays a major role, whether they can or cannot be brought on your particular project. And lastly, political factors. Yes, they are often difficult to know, but need to be taken into consideration as well. For instance, you want to know what people's goals or hidden agendas are. If you know in advance that a particular group in your organization has a goal that matches up with your project, you'd be wise to try and bring them on, because it is in their interest to see your project succeed. Similarly, you want to bring on those groups and people who have a certain formal or informal power in the company and can help move the project forward for you. Let's take a look at 3 other common influencing factors that we have to keep in mind regarding your human resource planning. The first influencing factor is organizational structure. Yes, we just mentioned that on the previous slide, but here we're talking about the project organization specifically. For instance, if you are a project manager in a projectized organization, then you will have a lot more authority in regards to human resource management on your project than if you are a project manager in a weak matrix organization. The latter will very likely be told the names of the project team members. So various structures may limit your authority or the authority of the other project team members. The second influencing factor, collective bargaining agreements, or really any procurement or contractual agreement that are impacting your project resources. Mostly this relates to unions and their respective agreements. These agreements have contractual rules and potential penalties for not following these rules. As an example, one of my former employees was a company in Boston, and they wanted to build a new office here in California. Well, The company in Boston had a contract with labor units in Massachusetts stating that they had to use union workers from Boston on all of their building projects. Well, it would of course have been ridiculous to fly these people all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast to work on the building. Consequently, it was then agreed that we were going to be using local union workers to work on our construction project out here in California. And then the third influencing factor, economic conditions. Your company may put financial restraints on your project. This could be due to the overall state of the local external economy or the internal pressure to rein in costs, for instance. You may be told that there is no money to co-locate your team, to hire external consultants, or to fly people around. In that case, you will have to choose different resources from the available pool. The way your organization is managed and run is also a major contributing factor towards being able to plan your project's human resource needs. You have to ask yourself questions like, how do we run and manage our projects? How will existing departments be involved in this project here? How do the departments work together? How do projects work together with departments? Do we have the required expertise even available in-house, or are there any unwritten rules about projects and human resources that might impact us? This is just a small sampling of potential questions that you have to ask, but your organization may have its own questions, or these questions here could lead to other questions that you need to ask on your projects in regards to human resource management planning. We're moving on to organizational process assets to see how these company documents will influence your project's human resource choices. Organizations, they typically have standard policies and processes. For instance, a policy may say that you have to employ union workers to build new office buildings. There could be escalation procedures that describe when you need to involve C-level executives to help handle issues. There could be templates for organizational charts, position descriptions, or standard project performance appraisals. Checklists, you may have certain checklists that you can use. These can be as varied as responsibility checklists or checklists that list ideas for rewarding your project team. There could be guidelines, for instance, how to bring on new hires into the company or onto the project. There could be project role descriptions, especially if there are contractual role designations. And of course, we always have lessons learned files so you can see who was brought onto similar projects in the past, human resources that worked on these projects, and how well they performed, so you can make an educated decision whether or not you want to bring them onto this new project here. Overall, organizational process assets, these documents, they either limit your choices or they are here to make your life easier. We are moving on to the tools and techniques of plan human resource management, and lucky for us, there are 5 pretty straightforward tools and techniques. First of all, we have organizational charts and position descriptions. Then networking, followed by organizational theory, expert judgment, and finally meetings. Looking at our first tool and technique, organizational charts and position descriptions, you'll notice, well, we've talked about these before, we've seen these before, but let's take a look at them separately. So we begin with charts right now, and then we'll do the position descriptions in a few slides down the road. So organizational charts, they exist to document the team and team member roles, responsibilities, and reporting structure. This provides a clear way way for team members to understand where they are in the organization as well as the roles of others. Organizational charts can come in various styles, but generally they serve the same purpose. The traditional hierarchical type organizational chart is the most typical. At the top you have a box for the project sponsor or project manager, and below that you have boxes for the various groups, with boxes underneath indicate who reports to the person above them in the chart. This type of chart is called an OBS, an organizational breakdown structure. Then there are also text-oriented formats, which basically lists these out. These could mirror an outline or a spreadsheet or any type of document listing the role descriptions, authority level, responsibilities, team involvement, qualifications, and so on. Just think of an OBS, a chart that you describe in a text format. Additionally, there are also matrix-based charts. Again, this is more visual. They are grids listing the various roles or team members and their responsibilities in reference to various activities or work packages. The matrix-based charts are also referred to as responsibility assignment matrices, or the RAM. Let's dig a little deeper into this chart style right now. The grid or table structure of matrix-based charts, the RAM, the responsibility assignment matrix, provides you with a very visual representation of who is on your project team and which role is responsible for which part. You can draw something like this at any level, at a high level where you might list departments or group names, or at a low level where you might list individual people and their roles. Within seconds you can then spot gaps in responsibilities quickly, or get a sense of when one person or a role may be overloaded more than another. The most popular version of this RAM is the RACI chart, because the letters RACI, as you see in this example here, are used to fill in the boxes. R means responsible. Essentially, this is the person responsible for doing the work. A is for accountable, and as a general rule, there should only be one person accountable for each activity that you have in your chart. C is for consultations, or people or groups that need to be involved before decisions are made or input is needed. Occasionally teams also use an S in combination with consultations to show that this person also has to sign off on a particular decision. And then finally we have I for information assignments. Those are the people who have to be kept in the loop on what is going on or has been completed, so they receive certain pieces of information. There are several breakdown structures that you need to be aware of. The OBS is the first one. This is the organizational breakdown structure. Its goal is to show how the departments in an organization or the teams on a project are arranged. Then the WBS is the work breakdown structure, and it's one of the most important tools to understand for the PMP exam. If you check out the various commercially available tests, you'll see that many questions are here on the WBS. You really have to know this one. The WBS is of course the tool that is used to show how your project is broken down into work packages, how the scope of your project is broken down into work packages. Then there is the RBS, the risk breakdown structure. This is a hierarchically organized listing of the risks that you have identified on the project. And lastly, there is the resource breakdown structure. This too is a hierarchical structure, and it shows the resources in a company or a project by their category, no matter where in the OBS they are located. So even though you may have 10 teams that are building homes independently in the OBS, the truck drivers and their trucks will be listed in their respective teams separate, but in the resource breakdown structure they will all be listed in the same category of truck driver and truck. So in review, we have the OBS that lists teams. We have the WBS that lists deliverables and work packages. We have the risk breakdown structure that shows us the risks, and the resource breakdown structure that lists types of resources. As you can see, there's a lot of BS going on here. Remember, we're still talking about our first tool and technique, organizational charts and position descriptions. So far, we've just talked about the charts. Now let's move on to the position descriptions, which fall into the category of text-oriented formats. These position descriptions are, of course, written documentation. The descriptions often describe for each team member the required responsibilities, competencies, qualifications, as well as authority. So the responsibilities of the positions, where companies have these descriptions predefined, almost like templates that you can simply apply to your project. We talk about the competencies or the skill set that is needed. We talk about the qualifications, which may also include training required either from outside the project or as part of the project. And of course, we also have to talk about authority in terms of who they report to and who reports to them and what decisions that people can make. The tools that we have just learned about are all hard tools. Now let's look at a soft tool, networking. On the face of it, networking seems like a strange tool and technique to show up in the PMBOK guide, doesn't it? But let's think about it. Let's say you are a project manager and you are in the process of finding the perfect resource to work on the project. Well, the only way to find them is by asking around, by networking. In this way, you not only get to understand what resources may be available on your project, but you also learn about the informal relationships and the political and interpersonal factors. You are also better able to apply your political capital around the organization when you need these resources. Depending on your position in the organization and the perceived importance of your project, you may be limited on what you can ask for, which means you have to cash in from time to time to get or pull resources from other parts of the organization, or possibly from the outside. It is much more difficult to successfully do this without having the optimal networking connections in place and the knowledge of the best resources and their connections, their ties. Well, that's it for networking. By the way, we also know this by another name. We call it formal and informal interactions. You are constantly networking, whether you are thinking about this as networking when you talk to somebody or not. Every interaction with somebody else is a form of networking. When planning the human resource needs for the project and how to manage them, there must also be consideration into how they can function together as a team and what methods are available to get the most out of them. This is where organizational theory comes into play. Organizational theory is information on the way people, teams, groups, and other organizational units behave and operate. There are a few general and sometimes universal themes that you should be aware of and plan accordingly. Some are even backed by research. Some considerations there include the way that different people or teams respond differently to various situations or project environments, how individuals perform under various staffing arrangements or recognition, such as team players versus sole competitors. Then there are the social dynamics and personnel relationships, as well as the characteristics of these. Then leadership style. Your leadership style is, of course, a consideration. The leadership style of the functional managers, particular team members, and others needs to be considered. Or how mature or immature your team is, how experienced they are, both individually and as a team. These are just a few items to consider, but as you are dealing with people, there are a great deal of people elements that you must work with when planning. I definitely don't have to explain to you what meetings are or what expert judgment is, but let's take a look at what these two tools and techniques are used for here in the Plan Human Resource Management process. So, expert judgment is of course the simplest and quickest technique there is. What has happened in the past, the research that others have done, learnings from your team that they have acquired over time, this can be leveraged to make decisions on human resource management planning. The wisdom that can come from you, the project manager, possibly having managed a similar project, needing similar plans, or being well versed in project management best practices to know what should be done or should not be done in this process. Could come from various other team members, possibly having been part of a previous project that had the right human resources, or one that really could have had better resources planned for and managed. They can also provide input on the amount of effort needed and the required skills. Others from outside the project organization can lend experience or guidance. They could also lend insight or on risks associated with staff acquisition, retention and release plans. And of course then we have published data, government compliance, union contract, lessons learned, white papers that were written, research that was done on human resources on projects. This can all be used. And then of course, I'm not going to say much about meetings, the beloved meetings. There are certainly going to be plenty of these planning meetings where we are going to meet with all of these experts and we're going to talk through their experience to see what of their past experience is going to impact our human resource management plan. And this takes us straight to the outputs of this process, or should I say output of this process, because it really can't get any simpler than this. If your process is to plan human resource management, then of course what you get as an output is the Human Resource Management Plan. If only the whole PMBOK guide were as simple as this one. Let me take you once again back to the very reason why we do all this planning. We want to plan what type of resources and how many of them we need and describe their roles and responsibilities. And like any other plan, the Human Resource Management Plan can be formal or informal, highly detailed, broadly framed, and it is based on the needs of your project. And it is of course a subsidiary plan of our overall project management plan. So, the Human Resource Management Plan documents the roles and responsibilities of the human resource types and quantities that are planned and desired for our project. This includes roles or positions or functions that are needed to be assumed by a person later on as we execute our project. We describe the authority, may be revised over time as necessary, such as what decisions they can make or sign off on. We describe their expected duties, responsibilities, and other expectations, as well as the competencies that are needed, the skill sets, to list just a few examples here. The plan also contains organizational charts that we have been developing and revising, and additionally it also includes the staffing management plan. So let's now open up the staffing management plan and see what it contains. Item number 1 in the staffing management plan, the acquisition and hiring or getting your project staff. Where will your staff come from? What will they cost? Where will they work? The good thing here is that much of the acquisition in companies comes with a lot of support from your human resources department. Therefore, the staffing management plan is going to be a really good and useful tool for describing to your human resources department what staff you need and what they will need to look like. Item number 2, resource calendars and timetables. A big question is when you need these people and when you don't need them any longer. Also, the associated project cost and the cost baseline. In the cost baseline, you plan when which expenses will occur and you know exactly that in January you will spend 1 million euros and in February only 500,000. This information is stored in the project resource calendars and tells you when you will need which resources, and since resources cost money, that all ties back together. And then item number 3, release plans and criteria. When are your project staff members going to be done? When can they return to their day job? What does the procedure of offboarding them look like? Put yourself into the shoes of a member of your project team. You're working on a project and you know it's going to end in 1 year. What's going to happen to me when the project ends? What will I do afterwards? If you have a clear release plan and clear release criteria, you and your team members know what's coming, and you can plan for and work on smooth transitions of the team members onto another project. Item number 4 in the staffing management plan, training needs. We must discuss education, mentoring and training needs. Here it's important for you to realize that you may not get all the senior resources that you would want, or you may be using new technology that nobody in your company has any know-how of. Therefore, you need to include training in the staffing management plan. We also discuss recognition and rewards. What is the plan to acknowledge excellent work? Does it need to be expressed explicitly, or can it be vague? What about gifts and rewards? Are the rewards appropriate? Do they fit the needs and objectives of the team, or are they going to be doing more damage than good? Item number, 6, I believe? Regulation, observance and compliance. Observing regulations is an important factor. We must make sure that we comply with rules and regulations. You may be working in a regulated area like deep sea diving, for instance, where there are clear regulations of how long someone is allowed to work, or your company may have a contract with a union that you need to comply with. And the final item of the staffing management plan that we want to discuss is security, safety and protection. And this depends very much on your area of work. Say, software development versus welding an oil pipe. This will define how many procedures and policies in regards to safety are going to be included in the staffing management plan. Let's review. The main concept that you have to understand in this process is that you plan for what type of resources you need, what qualifications they should have, and when you will bring them on and take them off the project again. Your primary output is your human resources management plan, which contains the staffing management plan. And these two plans together, they help define the staffing needs of the project, including role descriptions, reporting relationships, authority levels, responsibilities, and expectations. How and when the project is to be staffed by the planned resources, how the resources are to be trained, recognized, kept safe, and otherwise managed, and also how the resources are to be acquired and released. And now let's apply what you have learned to a sample exam question that you may find online in a simulator or in a book. The question is, which of the following is not considered an activity performed during the plan human resource management process? Is it A, describing staff roles and responsibilities, B, confirming staff availability, C, addressing staff reporting relationships, D, creating the staffing management plan? So, which one did we not talk about? The answer is, of course, B. Confirming the staff or human resource availability is an activity that is performed in the acquire project team process. All other activities listed as possible answer choices are activities that are indeed performed in our process here. And this concludes our look at the plan human resource management process. So it's time for Justine to say,
May the force be with you.
And I say, until next time.